So one question to consider is a really fundamental one about currency. Should we have it? And if so, who should control it? So what do you think, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, I wouldn't have thought this years ago that it'd be a relevant question, to be honest. But now it's a legitimate question, and certain governments are really asking this. You've got developed countries. I think it was Sweden announced that they wanted to go to kind of a cashless society. Now they're kind of pulling back a little bit and realizing they didn't think it through completely. You've got other places. We talked about Marshall Islands. Maybe having like an official currency will be crypto or crypto-based. The reality is, it's probably a premature question. The other reality is, no matter how you and I answer this, sovereign governments are going to be deciding the answer to this question. So I think maybe the more relevant question to me is, do I think governments will give up a physical fiat currency? I think the answer is no. I certainly think the U.S. government is definitely not going to give that up. It provides them so much influence and so much power around the world. Other governments, like say China, they use currency as a way to kind of control their state-run economy, which does make sense. And so I think this is probably not going to be a question that is going to be realistically considered in most countries anytime soon. And I would say it's quite the opposite. In fact, I would say they're probably going to be very opposed to the idea. And you have, I think, the World Bank, when Marshall Islands was proposing the cryptocurrency as a potential currency, they specifically warned them against that, saying it would drive down their donations and other things because they would not be able to. The other countries wouldn't like that. Yeah,
I think you're right. I mean, I think the idea of influence, which you mentioned, particularly for large economic countries that have large economic influence, say like the United States, a large part of that is driven by the fact that the U.S. dollars are widely accepted currency. And so if we think about the ability for United States laws and regulations to permeate the rest of the world, and banks in other parts of the world having to follow these regulations, a large part of that is the fact that they transact in U.S. dollars, which allows the United States to extend the arm of regulation beyond its borders. And so for sure, they don't want to give that up. And then, collectively, something like the European Union, the fact that they're using euros as opposed to individual state currencies now, I think, provides them a little bit more as a bloc, some influence versus when they were disparate countries using kind of their own currencies. Right? And so the idea of influence, I think, is right. I think ultimately what we'll probably see outside of kind of these instances like the Marshall Islands, which are kind of small and somewhat isolated economies, is I definitely think there'll be a move towards kind of hybrid type of systems over time.
Yeah,
probably
cashless payment systems.
Probably in our time. Most of that will likely be backed, I think, by some level of fiat currency. And I think the reason we probably don't want to go to a completely, system that is completely devoid of any currencies, inclusion issues, which we've talked about. I mean, inevitably, if you do that, then you will exclude people who, for whatever reasons, are not able to access the digital technology.
Or don't want to. Some people want to stay off the grid.
And so,
that's a challenge. Just one thing to add, again, for those that are maybe not as commonly in a developing country, actually that physical currency is actually one of the ways that developing countries control the use and kind of spending of their currency, right? So they don't let it leave in large quantities. They don't allow the free conversion of their currency because they don't, for example, let's say someone is corrupt and steals $1 billion, or they make several $1 billion in like a real estate deal, and then they immediately pull that out. They want to make sure they can kind of control the use of that currency. So having a physical currency is actually a way that, say, a country like China has kind of controlled their development.
And manage your money supply and things like that. No, absolutely.
Yeah.